The night wind snaked through the rotting crevices of the Blackmoor Theater, creating faint whistling sounds that resembled the whispers of the restless dead. The ancient structure sat desolate upon a coastal cliff, where waves crashed incessantly against the rocks, composing a perpetual, mournful symphony. Blackmoor was once a cathedral of art, radiant with crystal chandeliers and thunderous applause. Now it was nothing more than a decaying shadow, a soulless carcass in a declining seaside town. On the main stage, where the floorboards were warped and groaned under every step, a solitary figure stood in silence. Elena Cross, the woman once hailed as the nightingale of the seas, gazed into the hollow auditorium. Rows of dust-covered seats stretched into the darkness like an infinite line of mute witnesses to her downfall. She stood there, her breath trembling in the ocean chill, feeling a gnawing loneliness consume her flesh. Once her voice could move an audience to tears with a single vibrato, but now she knew all too well that voice no longer belonged to her. It was a debt, a curse. 3 years ago, Elena Cross's name was plastered across every headline. Her new album topped every chart, and tickets for her performances in the world's great capitals sold out within minutes. Fans knelt at her feet. The press hounded her like a goddess. Yet, amidst that blinding brilliance, Elena always felt a dark shadow looming. That shadow was Mara Vale. Mara was more than a colleague. She was Elena's closest friend since their days of poverty. Mara possessed a rare voice, deep, melancholic, and profoundly soulful. If Elena's voice was the radiant sun, Mara's was the mysterious night. During private rehearsals, Elena shuddered as she realized the truth. Mara's voice possessed a spiritual depth she could never reach. If the world ever truly hears Mara sing, I will be nothing but a background player, Elena whispered to herself. That fear, initially a tiny seed, eventually took root in her heart, blossoming into the poisonous weed of envy. The ultimate opportunity to extinguish that threat arrived on the night of the exclusive audition for the Blackmoor Theater. It was a multi-million-dollar contract, but more importantly, it was the ultimate symbol of power in the artistic world. Before taking the stage, Elena slipped into the dressing room. She saw Mara's small vial of dark green herbal tonic on the table, an extract of highland roots Mara always used to keep her vocal cords warm and supple before tackling the most difficult high notes. Elena looked around, her heart thumping as if it would burst from her chest. With trembling hands, she pulled out a small vial containing a colorless, odorless liquid, a temporary vocal cord constrictor she had secretly purchased from a black market broker. She swapped them. Just this one performance, Elena reassured herself, cold sweat pouring down her temples. I just need Blackmoor. But when Mara stepped onto the stage, tragedy struck. At the climax of the aria, Mara's voice suddenly shattered. It wasn't a common technical flaw, it was a painful screech, as if an invisible hand were strangling her throat. The audience gasped in shock, then began to hiss and jeer. Mara stood there, deathly pale, her eyes searching desperately for Elena, who was watching from the wings. A few days later, Mara vanished without a trace, leaving behind a brief note. My voice was everything I had. Now it is dead. Elena won the contract. She became the queen of Blackmoor, but the crown she wore was fashioned from thorns. From her very first performance, every time Elena sang, she felt a cold draft ripple down her spine. One night, while sustaining a crystal-clear high note, she suddenly heard another voice join her. It was weak, sobbing like a cry, yet it harmonized perfectly with her tempo. She stopped, glancing at the orchestra, but the musicians were still playing passionately. The audience continued to applaud. They seemingly heard nothing. Only she heard it. The eerie occurrences intensified in the dressing room. The gold-rimmed antique mirrors occasionally reflected a distorted image. Elena saw herself, but behind her shoulder, in the dim corner of the room, stood the silhouette of another woman. Long, disheveled black hair, sunken, sorrowful eyes. "Elena," a whisper drifted as the electric lights flickered and died. "Is it working well? My voice, my career?" Elena began to lose her mind. She took high-dose sleeping pills but could not stave off the nightmares. In her dreams, she saw Mara standing in the center of the Blackmoor stage, her throat leaking not songs but black, viscous musical notes that looked like blood. Those sounds weren't music, they were the grinding teeth of betrayal. After 6 months, Elena's health withered. She grew gaunt, her eyes framed by dark circles. Paradoxically, her voice became hauntingly beautiful. People flocked to Blackmoor in droves to hear the devil's voice. They said that when Elena sang, they didn't just hear with their ears, they felt an invisible hand squeezing their hearts. One stormy night, when the auditorium was nearly empty due to the weather, Elena looked down at the front row. Amidst the velvet-red seats sat a solitary woman. She did not clap, she did not move. It was Mara, but not the Mara of 3 years ago. This Mara looked like an entity stitched together from shards of memory. "Give it back to me," Mara said, her voice no longer echoing, it was merely a dry breath. "You swapped the vial, but you also swapped our destinies." "I'm sorry, I'll give you money, fame, anything," Elena shrieked, collapsing onto the wooden stage. Mara stood up, slowly ascending the steps. The stage lights shone upon her, but she cast no shadow. "Money cannot sing, Elena. Fame cannot hum. I want my life. If you wish to keep this voice, you must accept the rest of it." "What do you mean?" "You shall be the corpse, and I shall be the song." From that night on, Elena realized she was losing control over her body. Waking up in the morning, she had no memory of the previous night. Her childhood memories grew hazy, replaced by Mara's. The scent of the old house where Mara grew up, the agony of being betrayed, and the fierce passion for music Mara once held. Whenever Elena took the stage, she no longer needed to try. An invisible force vibrated her larynx. Songs Elena had never learned, Mara's melancholic melodies, flowed out automatically. She felt like a marionette pulled by strings. The audience went wild for the change, but Elena was terrified. She felt herself dissolving, piece by piece. In the mirror, Elena's reflection grew fainter, while Mara's features became sharper, more vibrant. Mara was slowly consuming her existence. And then, tonight arrived. The night Elena knew she would no longer be herself. The Blackmoor Theater was empty tonight. The manager had closed it due to heavy rumors of hauntings. But Elena came anyway. She wore her most magnificent gown, standing under the dim spotlight. "Fine," she whispered into the void. "If this is the price, I accept." Elena began to sing, but the first note that emerged was not her own. It was a celestial surge of sound, so powerful that the crystal chandeliers in the ceiling rattled and shattered. Mara's voice had returned fully, more radiant and glorious than ever. At the climax of the song, Elena felt a jolt of electricity surge through her. Her soul was shoved back into the darkest, narrowest corner of her mind. She saw her body standing tall, proud, her eyes sparkling, but they were Mara's eyes. Elena wanted to scream, but she no longer had a throat. She wanted to cry, but she no longer had eyes. She was merely a faint thought, eternally imprisoned within the flesh of the woman who was once her friend. Decades passed, and the Blackmoor Theater collapsed entirely, leaving only moss-covered ruins. Locals say that on nights of the waning moon, a magnificent female voice can still be heard from the cliffs. The singing is so pure, it makes the listener feel their soul is being cleansed. But if anyone is brave enough to draw near and listen closely during the pauses between notes, they will hear another sound. A choked moan, a desperate whisper always trying to break through, only to be strangled instantly. It is Elena. She is still there, trapped forever in the shadow of the voice she once stole, witnessing the brilliance of another until the very end of time.